Corporate legal teams today are under constant pressure to manage costs, manage growing workloads, and stay ahead of risk across litigation, investigations, and compliance. But here's the challenge. Even with more technology, more vendors, and more resources, many legal teams are still overspending. And it's not always because of one big decision. More often, it comes down to something less visible: fragmented ownership of technology, of vendors, and of the processes that actually run the business of legal. What happens when legal operations steps in and starts running legal like a disciplined business? That's what today's conversation is all about. I'm Mike Hamilton, VP of Marketing at Xtero, and this is Data Exposure, brought to you by Xtero, the leader in e-discovery, data privacy, forensics, and data risk management technology. Today, I'm joined by Alayne Russom, Director of Legal Operations at Thrivent. Alayne has built her career at the intersection of legal, technology, and operations. Starting on the front lines as a paralegal and evolving into a leader focused on optimizing how legal work actually gets done. In this episode, she shares how centralizing legal technology and vendor management helps her uncover millions of dollars in savings, how to rethink outside counsel spend by bringing more work in-house, and how legal ops leaders can streamline processes across the business without slowing teams down. Alayne, welcome to the podcast. Before we get into the meat of the presentation, really want to learn more about you and how you got started in the industry and what really drew you to it.
Well, thanks for having me, first of all. And I also just want to give a quick little disclaimer that the opinions and things that I state today are my own and not that of my employer. But how I got into the legal field, what drew me into it, when I was in college, I was a criminal justice major. I had a dream of going to law school and becoming a criminal defense attorney. Really, I wanted to be a public defender. It turned out law school wasn't for me. Instead, I became a litigation paralegal, which was actually really incredibly rewarding. I worked in a couple of law firms before coming to my current employer in 2005. The thing I liked most about being a paralegal was digging into each case and looking for that needle in a haystack. I loved the discovery process. I loved reading emails, notes, medical records. I think I was a unicorn in that I really loved summarizing medical records, and I just found that fascinating.
Mm.
Employment records, just everything. 13, I took on a 2-year temp role leading our code of conduct office, which included conducting internal fraud investigations. I became a certified fraud examiner, and I was able to get my fill of digging into each of the cases the same way I did as a paralegal. After that role ended, I pitched the idea of developing and leading an e-discovery program that would support both litigation and our internal investigations. That was approved and continues to be a bucket of work I'm responsible for today.
That's a really interesting path to where you're at now. You're the Director of Legal Operations at Thrivent. And before we get into the next question, I have to follow up. You're the one that suggested that you develop a program around e-discovery and internal
Correct.
investigations. Tell me a little bit about how that came into your mind, how you got started, how you proposed it. People would be really curious because that's a big undertaking.
The original plan was that I would go back to being a paralegal, but I really thought that there was a bigger opportunity there. I saw the parallels between conducting investigations and digging into litigation cases. I mean, really, it's all investigation, right? And I knew that there was technology out there that could support that, and I thought there was a big opportunity to bring those worlds together and find the synergies that where the work cross paths, that it could be a really good support system, developing a process that was consistent across all of legal and investigations. It's really created a lot of consistency in
Mhm.
the work, perhaps, and a way that people can do things more efficiently and better, quite frankly.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, the program it's got training, it's got everybody's using the same system. We're using templates where we've got an auditing feature. We've got a very defensible process. And a lot of the investigations flow right into litigations. A lot of that work is just done ahead of time.
And so give me the before picture. What did it look like before you implemented all these changes?
Oh boy. Everybody did the work differently. We were tracking legal holds on spreadsheets. I remember back in the day of printing out a memo and sending it through inter-office mail, advising a custodian that they were on legal hold and then having to follow up with them manually. Some people did this by email, some people did this through inter-office mail. I think there were probably conversations that were had by phone. There were some folks that did a better job of, checking all the boxes than others. Just sending out the legal hold in and of itself is not sufficient. You need to follow up, make sure the custodian responds, acknowledges, tells you what data they have. And then some people stopped there looking at what they had for data until it came time for, okay, now we need this for litigation. I hope our custodian followed the rules and actually kept that data. Sometimes custodians don't have any control over
Mhm.
how long data stays in the environment. You have to really follow up. We looked at all of that and made sure that we had a process that made sure that we were performing our due diligence.
And when you talk about we, obviously you're the director of legal operations. Are you kind of a one-man team and when you're ensuring this consistency, or do you have people that you work with that help enable these processes?
I have an individual that reports directly to me. For this entire process, I would say we're a two-man team, but I like to actually think of our team as being much larger. I don't necessarily need to have everybody reporting to me to, get a consistent process. We have litigation attorneys and paralegals that I consider to be part of that team as well. We're all part of the same team, even if we're all reporting to somebody different. We're all following the same process. I made sure to be consistent and bring people along on the journey, seek feedback. It was just all part of the change management and getting that buy-in from everybody that this is the right way to do things. And it works. And over time, you build up that trust. And as an expert, people do look at me as an expert now, even though I'm not an attorney. And we all have mutual respect. It just works well.
And how many people are we talking about here that you're trying to help enforce a process and create that consistency and repeatability? How many people are you trying to coordinate across?
I mean, it's about 10 people.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not a huge team. We do have some one-off litigations, like maybe our distribution attorney will have a strange litigation matter that'll pop up. And, she doesn't have a paralegal that assists with that. So I'll step in and I'll help with that. We all pitch in, we all help each other out, and we get the work done.
The question that I have based on all your experience, right, is how do you know when a process is actually broken versus, hey, maybe I just need a tool to help manage this process?
Yeah. There's a couple of reasons this happens. First, we get siloed in our work teams. We have people that aren't talking to each other about the work or how it's done or what tools are being used. It's the old adage, we don't know what we don't know. Having a centralized team that has insight into the various tools and processes are essential to understanding those capabilities. Another problem, like we talked about earlier, change management. If you have poor change management, that's another reason for that happening. I've seen tools that have very robust capabilities that no one will adopt because they're not user friendly and appropriate training hasn't happened. People are left to try and figure it out on their own. It's not going to happen. That trust becomes broken. The tool's basically useless. Or possibly implementation doesn't go well and the tool breaks early and often, and the trust in the tool, again, is never established. It becomes shelfware, and all along good implementation and proper change management would have produced a much more desirable outcome.
That's a key phrase that you just used there, is change management, because the next question I have for you relates to that. And that's with how you've helped organizations save time and money by centralizing your tech stack and retiring old systems. Why do you think it's so easy for professionals anywhere, albeit if they're in the legal department, to accidentally end up using technology that they buy on their own, or they get sign off with their own manager, but they don't talk to the rest of the team? And you go to someone's desk and you see, hey, they're using technology X. And you're thinking, well, I could use technology X. How do you think that happens? Why does that occur?
Uh, I'll just say process improvement is something I'm really passionate about.
Mhm.
I'll ask people, show me how you do this process, or what are you doing today, or what are you using today? And then I keep that in the back of my mind. I'll tap into not just my paralegal experience, but also my experience running the code of conduct office or my experience in having supported another team. I really like using tools that we already have in place to fix broken processes. And obviously, if we don't already have a tool, we may want to start looking for something new. But a lot of processes aren't actually broken. They're just perhaps being used by people who are uninformed that there's a better way to do it. And people get stuck in an autopilot mode. I like working with people to try and find a better way to do things. COVID was a great example of helping people with that. We all had to go and work from home, and people were completely lost without that copier or without access to markers to redact things. It was really interesting. Or the notary process was another great process. I implemented a tool so that we could do remote notarizations and a process for getting people on that remote notary tool. That was another great example. Having a centralized person that's working with everybody, that sees all the different processes, can help connect those dots and connect people to technology, connect people to people. It really helps to break down those silos and get people working together.
Let's talk more about how to minimize costs because you've noted a couple different ways that you help to increase efficiency. But let's talk about cost. And I know that's always on the top of mind of a legal operations professional. You've worked with outside counsel and you've saved a lot of money trying to utilize them more efficiently and more effectively. So for a department stuck with, let's say, rising rates from outside counsel, or how do you or how have you started the conversation about bringing more of that work back in house and what's the value of that?
Yeah, first it's important to understand what you're being charged. Having a process in place to regularly review each outside counsel attorney's rate is super important. You need to do that regularly, be it annually or every 2 years. You need a system that will audit to make sure you're being billed according to the agreement you've worked out with that law firm. That is how you get the data. And then you let that data paint a picture that shows the actual cost of using outside counsel. I've seen rates increase by as much as 20% in 1 year from a law firm partner. It's super important to pay attention to that. But once you have that data, you can determine what to do next. Here's an example as a powerful conversation starter to do with in house counsel. Compare your law firm timekeeper rates from last year to this year and assume that all the hours are flat in your current year. If all the work is the same, what is the difference between what you'll pay this year and what you've paid last year? It's eye opening. Firms have increased their rates due to having to purchase new technology. There's an expectation that law firms are using AI. That was an increased cost to them. But AI is going to cause them to do their work more efficiently. It's not going to be built out. Something that was maybe built out that took them 5 hours of time might only take them 1 hour now. They have to recoup that cost somewhere. We've seen a huge increase in those rates. Another thing to look at is which timekeepers are billing the most. What is their level within the firm? Is the right level in the law firm performing the work? Are we negotiating lower rates? You can actually see that if the firm says, okay, this is our base rate, but we negotiated a 10% discount. You can report on that. You can report on alternative fee arrangements. We know what the hourly rate is. We know our spend with XYZ firm is $2 million a year. Maybe the special project they're working on for us, we could just negotiate a flat fee or a capped fee or something. Is it possible to do this in-house without adding additional bodies? When you see the data, when you present the data, it paints a compelling picture to do more in-house.
And take me behind the curtains. Are you the one analyzing this data and then you're having individual conversations with
Yep.
attorneys, or are you having that conversation with their manager to say, here's some white space in which we can optimize spend?
I do this in partnership. We have a finance partner. So I do this in partnership with our finance partner. I make sure that he knows, he can see what we're spending as well. And I run the reports out of our system that's showing I have access to a little bit more data than he does. We work together and we meet with our senior leadership team within our general counsel's office, and they can see which step IDs are using the most in outside counsel. We can see accruals. We know what's going to be billed. And it's when you're showing them a picture that shows we're going to be spending X million dollars more this year versus what we spent the previous year. And maybe you even have a mandate to reduce your overall budget. You may have to add on extra bodies. You can see that you're going to be spending more on outside counsel. Where can we save money? Obviously, bringing stuff in-house is going to be the best bet.
Just off the top of your head, what are some of those areas that you feel are the best areas to bring more work in-house, just generally speaking? Where have you seen legal departments take something that has been outsourced to outside counsel and bring that back in-house? And what's the low-hanging fruit there?
Uh, Two things. The first one I would just say is legal research in general.
Mm,
There are so many tools out there that and again, it's a tool you're going to have to purchase, but it cost savings you're going to realize are significant. So, legal research, number one. Contract review is probably another piece of that. The other piece, of course, is litigation, the discovery phase of litigation. A lot of that can be done in house as well, especially around the data review.
and we'll hit on that here in a second, but I wanna
Mm.
get back to you have these conversations, you're making intelligent business decisions based on the trends and how much money you're spending. What has been the response from the law firms that you've been working with? Has it been, "Oh, well, we'll work with you to minimize the rate," or has it been shock, "Well, you're gonna have to go somewhere else?" What's that response been like?
They're definitely not shock.
Mm.
Most law firms, at least most mid to large size law firms, do this for a lot of their clients.
Mhm,
When you have billing guidelines incorporated into your engagement letter and a system that audits against those guidelines, it makes savings on outside counsel expenses so much easier. They know that we're tasked with trying to save money, that they will work with you. Especially where you're going to get your real savings are from the firms that get the most business from you. That's why it's really important to know who your most used
mhm.
attorneys are with outside counsel. Those are the ones you're going to want to hit up for those discounts. They're expecting you to ask those questions, and they're almost always prepared to give you some sort of discount or some type of alternative fee arrangement.
It's sad to say, and I'm not trying to talk down to anyone that's a lawyer, that's at a law firm, but it's almost like negotiating and buying a car, right? There's some wiggle room in that price,
Oh,
and
for sure.
you just need to ask for it the right way. And being around the legal community for so long is that there's almost this aura around the law firm, or there was this aura around the law firm of, well, we're so lucky to be working with you. And it's more of a partner relationship rather than a customer client relationship. I bet there's people out there that
Yeah,
haven't gone and asked because
correct.
right?
It's uncomfortable to have a conversation. I mean, you become good friends with
Mhm,
these people after a while, and it's uncomfortable to have those conversations. That's another area where I can help out. I've actually gone back to law firms for our attorneys and just said, "Hey, I'm working with John Smith, our in-house counsel here, and I pointed out to him that we have X dollars in spend with you every year. I'm wondering if there is perhaps some wiggle room here that we could work out a matter level rate for this
mhm,
project that we're working on with you. Would you be willing to give us a 20% discount over your base rates, or would you be willing to cap the fee at $25,000 or $40,000 or whatever it is? Come back with something. They
mhm,
almost always say we really value our partnership with your company, and we are definitely willing to work something out.
mhm.
I've never had a bad response from a law firm, to be honest.
That's a great technique. The in-house attorney wants to maintain that relationship, right? And so having
Mhm.
you come in as a third party makes total sense. Emotions kind of are taken out of the equation. It's more, this is a business decision.
Exactly.
I want to get back to you talked about one of the areas where you thought savings could be built up was around document reviews. Can you talk to me about a lot of a lot of guests that we've had come on, some more than others, have been moving towards a model of, hey, we collect our own data in-house, and then we want the law firm or whoever the third party service provider is to come into our tool and review documents in our tool so that we can a not accrue the extra costs for sending data out for data storage with the law firm, maintain the privacy security of having the data in one place and not having duplicates of that data. Is that what you're talking about when you talk about document review and how bringing that in-house can be a cost savings?
For sure. You hit on a couple of the points. There's the privacy risk of sending out personally identifiable information or personal health information. There's the cost of ingesting the data that the firm will charge you. There's the cost of processing and deduplicating that data, the process of culling through that data, removing files that don't need to be reviewed, then the cost of setting up the review and performing the review. We've actually tried to move more to a model, especially in our litigation matters where we get all of that set up in house, right down to setting up the review and training the reviewers and letting them into our environment. I think it's scary for the law firms. They've pushed back quite a bit on their attorneys, and they try, of course, to do that when I'm not on the call.
Yeah.
But we've done it a few times now, and it's gone really well.
Uh,
So and I didn't even mention the cost of hosting the data, which
uh-huh.
quite frankly is probably the most expensive piece of it. You're not paying for the project manager either.
Uh,
It's really just that cost of the reviewer's time
uh,
or the per document time or whatever it is that, you're being charged.
uh, uh,
So I like to also I have a spreadsheet, which actually is a model I'd gotten from one of our third-party service providers. I've said, "What would you charge to do this in-house? What is your rate per gig of data
uh-huh.
to review? What is your rate to host?" And then I plug in, sh- I plug in all of our numbers, and I can actually calculate out how much we've saved
Uh,
by doing it in-house.
uh,
It's it's tens of thousands of dollars, always,
that's
sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's quite a cost savings.
That's pretty amazing. That's pretty amazing. And as security data risk grows, the fact that you're at the forefront of this is telling that there's probably going to be more and more organizations where this is hopefully going to become the norm here soon.
Mhm. I think so. I think so.
Let's talk about just optimizing internal processes. We've talked about the third parties a little bit, but I want to talk about the relationship between IT and legal. And I often think of this as like a risk relay race because you're handing off the baton multiple times. And I've seen legal departments embed IT within legal. I've seen legal departments work with their counterparts in IT and that being effective as well. Can you talk to me about how you've set up that relationship with IT and how you work to make a more automated workflow?
Yeah. I love this question, and I'm gonna be honest, it's not just the handoff between IT and legal. It could be, and I know you're probably thinking specifically about e-discovery, but
Uh-huh.
thinking more broadly, it could be the handoff between business and
Mhm.
legal or any shared service in business. Having an automated workflow does several things. It provides transparency to the work. Who sent it, on what day, what time, who's performing the work, what was done, how long did it take. It provides an audit trail. It shows that you've done your due diligence. It'll also identify trends and risks. What are common themes? Is something broken that needs to be fixed, such as a process? Is there more training needed in a particular area? It can help identify the workload and resources needed to perform that work. The information, the data, again, everything comes down to the data
Uh-huh.
you get from that integrated automated workflow creates a more smooth and efficient business all around.
Uh-huh. And I guess we've talked a lot about change. I don't think we've talked really anything about like status quo. I've been doing this for the last 20 years and it stayed exactly the same. We're in a very evolving space. For those people that aren't as open to change, some of those lawyers listening, some of those paralegals maybe, how do you prove to them that this operational discipline of evolving and leveraging legal ops actually gives them more time for high value strategic work?
You may have heard me mention it before, Mike, but it all comes down to the data. You have to have the data to back it up.
Yeah.
You have to have a way to track your data, and you have to be able to report on it, and you have to have the skill set to take that data and turn it into a compelling story,
Uh-huh.
one that shows the value of operational discipline. No one wants to be doing low value work. Having information available to show how to have bigger wins is what wins the day. That's how you win people over. You have to have that data to show how you're going to create operational efficiency and let people focus on the more strategic.
That's an ROI presentation that you did
Exactly.
to whoever the stakeholders are.
Exactly.
And I'm just gonna just harp on this a little more, but I'm sure there's people that see that presentation and they still say, "No, I still think the way that we're doing things works best." How do you overcome those people? Or is it one of those things, there's always gonna be some naysayers, but over time they'll adapt?
Correct, but be a little strategic about how you go about presenting the data and who you're
Uh-huh.
presenting it to. It goes a long way. I've worked at my company for 21 years now. I know who my obstacles are.
Uh,
And I know who I need to bring along the journey with me first to help me tell the story and help me maybe convince some of those naysayers. And sometimes it's the person above them, sometimes it's their peers,
Uh-huh.
sometimes it's the people that work for them. It just really depends on the change that you're trying to make. But bring them along on the journey the whole way
Mhm.
is super important. You don't want to spring something on someone at the last minute and just say, I need you to make a decision now.
Uh-huh.
Help them to see the whole picture, where the process is broken, what the cost of that broken process is, and present a way to fix it using that data. If they're still saying no, then there might be another conversation you might need to have.
I love that you said that because it relates back to something that legal operations managers get this more than anyone else, or at least maybe anyone else in the legal department. We had a guest on, her name was Rashida. She was at Bill.com and she was talking about the human side of litigation readiness. I think you just touched on that. You need to know your key players. You need to know who you need to engage with early and
Right.
who's more of an advocate that you can engage with a little later. That's amazing. And it's a theme that should carry over all aspects of life, honestly, but especially within the legal world and the IT world.
Absolutely.
I want to move on to the last section of today's conversation, and I'd like to talk more about. I'm sure you haven't heard this phrase, artificial intelligence.
What's that?
I know, I know, I know. Who cares about artificial intelligence? That's still last year, right? But from your perspective, what do you think the real role of AI is going to be? Is it about replacing tasks, or is it actually about changing the architecture of how we handle litigation activities, etc.?
All of the above. I
Mm,
think it's really going to be about doing things differently, more efficiently. The tasks might still be there, but who is doing it? How are they being done? That's what's really going to change. And we've all been tasked with doing more with less, right? It's
uh-huh.
the tale as old as time. I've been hearing that for my entire 21 years at my company. And I think AI will be the biggest driver of how we make that happen going forward, as it's really been around for decades,
Uh-huh.
but now it's in more hands. The possibilities are truly endless. I don't think anyone can say for sure what the world of AI will be like 10 years or even 5 years from now, but it will be used to perform tasks and it will be used to assess risks, I'll say, or maybe even suggest ways to reduce risk.
I was curious on your perspective on. I get the feeling that in the legal space, in maybe the IT security space, people are a little more hesitant to AI than per se someone in the marketing space or in
Mhm.
the design space or the coding space. Would you agree with that assessment?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think one space is it's more visual and less risk. In the other space, there's maybe more of a lack of trust
Mhm.
that you're getting the right answers. We've all heard about hallucinations. We've all heard the stories of attorneys going to court with made up cases in their back pocket, and that creates skepticism and a little bit of distrust. What we should be preaching is trust but verify. We have to think of it more of as a starting point. Make sure you ask for those resources where it's getting its information from and make sure you check that out. It's going to save you a ton of time, but it's not really meant to be an end all to be all.
Okay, so I have another question for you that gets into your magic 8 ball, but where are you most excited to see how AI is going to transform your activities? And what's one area where you think AI hands off? Only humans can do this. This should be quarantined from AI.
The area that I'm most excited about is transforming data. I'm sorry, it just is. When we first implemented Copilot at our company, I was most excited to use Copilot in Excel, and I found it extremely frustrating because I didn't really understand how you could use it in Excel. And once I got that figured out, it was like a big game changer for me. I didn't really have to understand how to use Excel. I could say, hey, give me the formula to make my spreadsheet show that this is what I'm trying to show. What I had a whole conversation with Copilot one day to develop a really fancy pivot table to present data to our senior leadership team, and it was a game changer for me. What would have taken me IT resources to put together for me in the past, I was able to do by myself in a matter of maybe 2 hours. That was pretty great. That's the most exciting thing. I think AI, calling through that data for us and painting the picture for us is probably the most exciting thing. AI hands off, just the human connection, the human
Mhm.
relationships. I hear about people having small friendships or
Yeah,
relationships with AI. Oh, I just think that's wrong.
yeah.
That to me is really wrong. We're largely working from home now.
Mhm.
Ever since COVID, people have really liked that model, but I'm still one of those people. I miss being in the office. I miss seeing people. I miss that human connection, and that's where we have to keep AI hands off.
I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. I want to leave with this one final question. And for those who are currently in maybe lower level roles, maybe a paralegal, litigation support professional, maybe a legal operations manager, not at the director level yet, and they want to follow your path to where you're at now, what's the most important business skill they should start developing today?
Intellectual curiosity. That is 100% the most important skill to have. That is how you learn, just by digging in, asking questions, just being curious. Don't be afraid to ask questions. A lot of people think questions are going to sound stupid. Who cares? Just ask it anyway. Don't be afraid to jump online, do some research, read books. Just never stop learning. Just that intellectual curiosity is the absolute most important thing. And speak up. Speak up. If you got an idea, speak up. I presented plenty of ideas that were probably dumb ideas, but for every time I have been told, "Gosh, that's a great idea. Let's move forward." I'm so happy I spoke up. Never hesitate to speak up.
Elaine, thank you so much for your time today. I know I learned a lot,
Welcome.
and I'm sure our audience will
Thanks
as
for
well.
having me.
Well, thank you again.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
If there's one theme that runs through this conversation, it's this: legal departments don't overspend because they lack tools. They overspend because those tools, vendors, and processes aren't working together in a coordinated way. What Elaine highlighted is the real impact that comes from ownership and discipline, centralizing decisions around technology and vendors, taking a more intentional approach to outside counsel spend, and designing processes that actually help legal teams move faster, not slower. Because when legal operations gets this right, it does more than cut costs. It gives legal teams the ability to focus on the work that actually moves the business forward. Elaine, thanks again for sharing your perspective and your experience. If you found this conversation valuable, subscribe to Data Exposure for more insights on how legal, compliance, and security leaders are managing risk and transforming their operations. And if you're rethinking how your legal department manages legal spend, technology, or internal processes, this is exactly the kind of conversation we'll keep on bringing you. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time.